The carriage rattled along the narrow, muddy track, swallowed by fog so thick it seemed to devour the world itself. Inside, Count Arthur Hawthorne gripped the edge of the seat with pale, trembling fingers. It wasn't the late autumn chill that seeped into his bones. It was an older, deeper emptiness, a weariness of the soul that no Harley Street physician had ever managed to name, let alone cure. He had left behind crystal chandeliers, empty conversations in Mayfair drawing rooms, and the ceaseless echo of condolences he no longer heard. All of it had become unbearable. When the notary mentioned a forgotten cottage high in the Derbyshire hills, he paid without asking for details. He wanted a place where death could find him without witnesses, without pity, without noise. The coachman, a weathered man with ruddy cheeks, turned his head just enough for his voice to carry over the creaking wheels. "My lord, are you quite certain? There's no other house for 10 miles in any direction. No doctor, no inn, no living soul to help if you take a turn for the worse." Arthur barely moved his lips. "That is precisely why." The carriage lurched to a halt with a final groan of wood and leather. The wind howled through the heather and battered the door as though it wished to climb inside. Arthur stepped down, leaning heavily on his ebony cane with its silver knob. Fine snow was already settling on his shoulders. Before him, silhouetted against a leaden sky, stood the cottage. Slate roof sagging on one side, crooked chimney trailing a thin thread of gray smoke, moss-covered stone walls that looked as though they had grown straight out of the hillside. It was supposed to be abandoned. He pushed the door with his shoulder. The wood protested with a long creak. Warmth struck him first, then the amber glow of firelight, and then her eyes. A young woman stood beside the kitchen table, sleeves of a plain linen blouse rolled to her elbows, hands dusted with flour. Dark chestnut hair was gathered in a low knot, exposing the graceful line of her neck. She did not startle, she did not curtsy. She simply regarded him with a composure that bordered on indifference. "Good evening, my lord," she said, voice calm, almost neutral. Arthur blinked, thrown off balance. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" She tilted her head slightly, as though weighing the question. "I might ask you the same. This cottage belonged to my husband. He passed 3 winters ago. I have nowhere else to go. I purchased this property from Notary Hensley in the village. He assured me it was unoccupied." "Notaries tend to forget the living," she replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "They pay far more attention to the dead." Arthur studied her in silence. There was something in her posture, straight but not stiff, resolute but not defiant, that disarmed him more thoroughly than any London etiquette ever could. Her hands returned to the dough, kneading with precise, almost hypnotic motions. "If you're looking for warmth, come closer to the fire," she said without glancing up. "I won't turn you out tonight. You don't look fit to climb back into that carriage." "I require no charity." "It isn't charity, it's common sense." She nodded towards the deathly pallor of his face. "If you faint here, I'll have to drag you to the cot. I'd rather spare myself the trouble." Arthur meant to retort, but a sudden wave of dizziness forced him to brace himself against the doorframe. She set the bowl aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached without haste. She pushed a rough wooden bench toward him and draped a coarse but clean wool blanket over his shoulders. "Don't touch me," he murmured. "Then fall to the floor if you prefer. I won't beg you." Silence settled between them, heavy as the mist outside. Arthur sat down out of sheer necessity. She placed a steaming mug before him, ginger tea laced with wild honey. It doesn't cure, but it warms the insides. I accept no favors, nor do I give them for free. You may leave at first light, assuming the dawn comes in this weather." Arthur drank. The liquid scraped his throat, yet the heat slid down his chest like a merciful hand. For the first time in months, he felt something close to relief. "Your name?" he asked at last. "Eleanor Whitaker. And mine you already know? The newspapers spoke of you at length last year." She returned to the dough without looking at him. "They said the Count Hawthorne lost his brother and much of his fortune in the same season. That illness followed, like punishment or mercy, depending on whom you asked. Don't believe everything you read." "I don't, but what I see confirms part of the tale." Arthur set the mug down harder than he intended. "I did not come here for pity." "Then you've come to the right place. No one here has time or inclination to pity anyone." She lifted her gaze for the first time. "Not even death lingers long in these hills without good reason." The word death hung between them. Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. "I won't give it an audience," she said softly, "so don't trouble yourself performing for it." The words struck him clean and sharp. No one had spoken to him that way in years. No fear, no calculation, no feigned deference. He watched her fingers shape the dough with confidence he had forgotten existed. No hurry, no fear, only presence. "Do you live here entirely alone?" he asked quietly. "For some time now. The rest of my family rests in the little churchyard in the valley." She paused. "It isn't as melancholy as it sounds. At least they no longer feel the cold." Arthur felt a sudden, almost painful respect. He shrugged off his sodden greatcoat and hung it near the hearth. A cough doubled him over. Before he could protest, Eleanor was beside him, steadying him by the shoulders with surprising strength for her slender frame. "You should lie down." "I did not come to rest." "No one comes to these hills to die awake, my lord." He glared at her, fury flashing briefly, but he lacked the strength to sustain it. She guided him to a more comfortable chair by the fire, set a bowl of barley and leek soup before him, and sat opposite, watching him with the same quiet steadiness she had used to knead the bread. They ate in silence. Only the crackle of logs and the distant howl of wind filled the room. "What did you do in London before everything fell apart?" she asked suddenly. "Things that no longer matter. Then I suppose you do not miss them." "Missing is a slow way of dying," he answered roughly. Eleanor met his eyes directly. "No, dying is a slow way of forgetting." Arthur laid down his spoon. Something in her words pierced deeper than the cold. "You do not fear the end?" "I feared it greatly, for a very long time. Now I only fear surrendering before it arrives." The wind slammed the door. Both glanced towards the dark corridor. Arthur noticed the cottage had 2 rooms on either side and a passageway vanishing into shadow at the back. "What lies down there?" he asked. "Nothing that concerns you." "It looks like a room." It was. He did not press. Exhaustion was winning. Eleanor made up a cot beside the hearth, extinguished the oil lamps, and withdrew to the back. Before closing her door, she said quietly, "If you hear footsteps in the night, do not be alarmed. It is only the wind finding its way through the cracks. I am not a child. Some men fall ill before they ever grow up, my lord." Arthur wanted to reply, but his eyelids were already too heavy. He heard the soft click of the latch, then only the fire's murmur and his own labored breathing. He woke in the small hours, heart hammering against his ribs. Outside, sleet fell. The house was still.
except for one faint sound. Footsteps. Soft, almost barefoot, moving down the corridor. He pushed himself up with difficulty, grasped the cane, and listened again. The footsteps stopped before the door at the end. Then, a long, almost human sigh. "Eleanor," he called softly. Silence.
He rose, bracing himself against the wall, and advanced into the dark passage. The air smelled of damp timber, dried herbs, and something older, indefinable. The door at the far end was closed. From within came a low murmur, like a prayer or a lullaby he could not quite distinguish. He knocked lightly. "Are you all right?" Nothing. He turned to retreat when the floor creaked behind him. He spun around. The corridor was empty. He moved forward again and stopped once more before the door. The murmur had ceased. Only the wind outside remained. He lifted his hand to the handle. It was ice cold, as though untouched for years. "Ridiculous," he muttered to himself. He returned to the cot, but sleep did not return. At dawn, Eleanor was already baking bread. The scent filled the cottage. "You had a bad night," she said, without looking at him. "I heard noises. The wood groans when the temperature drops. They sounded like footsteps." "Everything sounds like something when one is waiting to die," she answered calmly. "Sit. The bread is nearly ready." Arthur obeyed. For the first time in a long while he did not argue. She cut a thick slice, spread it with fresh butter, and set it before him. "Eat. If you intend to die here, at least do not do it of hunger." He took the bread and looked at her steadily. "You always speak of death so lightly. When you have seen it up close more than once, it stops seeming so solemn." Arthur set the bread down. "Last night there was a voice. You cannot deny it." Eleanor stirred the embers without answering at once. "Let that matter rest, my lord. This house keeps old sounds, memories. Places hold them too. I hear them sometimes, but I do not stop to interpret them." Arthur watched her for a long moment. Something about her both bewildered and drew him. The firmness, the serenity, the way she spoke like someone who had survived too many farewells. "How old are you?" he asked abruptly. "Old enough to know there are no answers that heal, and yet I remain alive." "Why?" "Because someone must light the fire every night." And so it began. Day after day, the cottage became a strange territory of confrontation and unspoken care. Arthur coughed less when he drank the infusions she prepared. Eleanor worked without cease, chopping wood, tending the few sheep, mending fences, shaping loaves. He watched her from the chair by the hearth, writing fragments in a notebook that were no longer about his illness, but about her. About the curve of her hands when she kneaded dough. About the way she narrowed her eyes when watching snow fall. About the small silver scar on her right wrist that she never explained. About the closed door at the end of the passage that continued to pull at him like an unhealed wound. One full moon night, while wind moaned through the slates, Arthur rose, unable to sleep. The lamp trembled in his hand. He walked to the corridor. The door at the end stood ajar by the width of a finger. An icy draft escaped the gap. He pushed gently. The room was small and bare, an old wooden cradle covered by a threadbare blanket. On a little table, a folded letter with broken seal. Nothing else. But the cradle was rocking. Very slowly. Without draft. Without touch. Arthur stepped back, soul shrinking. Eleanor. She appeared behind him, pale, holding a candle. "What are you doing here?" He could not speak. He only pointed at the cradle.
Eleanor walked to it, laid her hand on the rail, and the motion stopped instantly. "You have no right to enter this place," she said, voice low but unyielding. It was moving by itself. Wind comes through the roof cracks. There was no wind. "You are exhausted. Return to the fire. I will not pretend I did not see this. Then carry what you saw." She took his arm and led him back to the main room. She made him sit. Her hands shook slightly. "Never open that door again." "What does it mean?" "It means there are things that require no explanation, only farewell." Arthur stared at her. "It is your son." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. "Do not say his name." "I did not even mention it." "Yet you thought it. Do not." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Neither slept that night. The next day, Eleanor was gone. On the table stood a cup of cold tea and a note in firm handwriting. "I have gone to the village. I return at dusk. Touch nothing." Arthur waited until the sound of her footsteps faded into the snow. Then he rose, resolved. He searched drawers, shelves, cupboards. In a wooden box he found a tiny blue wool scarf, a scarcely worn child's shoe, and a yellowed sheet. Certificate of death. William Whitaker. Deceased at 11 months. Cause, winter fever. Arthur sat with the paper trembling between his fingers. A child, a mother who had never let him go, a cradle that rocked alone. Everything fit. When Eleanor returned, she found him seated by the fire, gaze distant. "You have been going through my things." He did not answer. "I saw you from the window. You cannot stay here if you intend to profane the little I have left." "I was only seeking the truth." "The truth will not make you live longer." Arthur approached, voice low. "Then help me understand what happened to him." Eleanor looked at him with reddened eyes. "He died. Winter spares no one born frail." Arthur lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." "Do not be. You never knew him." The rest of the day passed in a long, aching silence. That night, while the fire snapped, Arthur wrote in his notebook, "She lost a son. That is why she hears his voice. That is why she tends an empty cradle. I do not know whether her mind broke or whether something more truly lingers in that room, but her pain is more real than my illness." At midnight, a cry awoke him. Weak, clear, unmistakable. The cry of an infant. Arthur sat bolt upright. The sound came from the back of the house. He took the lamp and advanced. Every step hurt. The cane struck the boards. The crying continued, soft, insistent. At the door he heard light through the crack. "Eleanor!" The crying stopped. He pushed. Locked. He called again. He heard a sigh from the other side, and footsteps retreating inside the room. He staggered back. Coughing seized him. He fell to his knees. The lamp went out. When he woke, he was on the cot, covered in blankets. Eleanor was grinding herbs beside him. "Do not get up." "What happened?" "The fever threw you to the floor." "I heard—" "You heard nothing. You were delirious." "It was not delirium." "My lord, do not argue. Your body cannot endure another night like that." Arthur closed his eyes. His head throbbed. "I know what I heard," he said weakly. "What you heard belongs to another life. You cannot go on living that way, and you cannot go on dying this way." She held out a bitter cup. "Drink." "What is it?" "Do not ask." He drank. Warmth spread through his chest. "I do not understand why you help me when you want me gone." "Because not everyone who waits to die deserves to do so." Arthur looked at her. Guilt flickered in her eyes. "Was it your fault?" "Be quiet." "Is that why you shut yourself away here? Why you keep the cradle?" She struck the table. Enough. She drew a deep breath and lowered her voice. There are things one does not name because naming them brings them back. Sometimes bringing them back is not so bad, he murmured. For you, perhaps, I have no strength for another loss. Silence enveloped them. Days passed. Arthur began to rise more often. He walked through the house, stepped on the porch wrapped in blankets, helped clumsily with small tasks. The cough remained, but it no longer doubled him over so violently. Eleanor watched without comment. One afternoon, while they chopped wood, he said, "I have decided to stay until the snow melts. It is not wise. I have nowhere else to go. London needs you. London does not need me." Eleanor studied him. "Here, neither. Perhaps not, but at least here no one expects me to pretend I am alive." She did not reply. She handed him a log and watched him split it with the little strength he possessed.
That night, over hot soup, Eleanor spoke without raising her eyes. "The night he died, there was no moon, only storm. I went for help, but the path was blocked. When I returned, he was no longer breathing." Arthur remained silent. "The room was left exactly as it was. I could not touch anything, not the cradle, not his blanket, not the letter he left me." "Letter? Yes, I have never read it." "Why?" "Because if I read it, the little I still have of him ends." Arthur felt a knot in his throat. "I did not know a memory could hurt so much. It hurts because it was real. Perhaps you need to open that letter. Perhaps you need to stop speaking of it." The conversation died there. Later, when Eleanor withdrew, Arthur waited. Then he walked to the passage. Beside the frame of the far door lay a small key. He picked it up, held it a long time. He could feel the cold weight of the metal. He did not know whether she had left it there on purpose. He returned to the cot with the key in his hand and stared at it all night. At dawn, Eleanor noticed his distraction. "You have not eaten." "I am not hungry." "Something troubles you." "Nothing I can tell you." "You lie poorly, my lord." Arthur raised his eyes. "Why do you still speak to me?" "Because silence would sicken you faster than the cough." The day passed quietly, but in his mind the key burned. At dusk, while Eleanor washed clothes at the stream, Arthur made his choice. He walked to the passage, inserted the key, turned. The click echoed through the house. He pushed the door barely. He did not enter, he only looked. Icy current, smell of dust and wilted flowers. The cradle, the little table, the letter was gone. He closed without sound. When Eleanor returned, she saw the change in his expression. "What have you done?" "Nothing." "Do not lie to me." "I found a key." Eleanor paled. "Where is it?" "In my coat." "Give it back." "Why?" "Because you do not know what that key opens." Arthur met her gaze. "Yes, I do." She extended her hand. "Give it to me, please." He placed it in her palm. Their fingers brushed. Eleanor pocketed it without another word. The fire crackled between them. Arthur felt he had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. That night, as Eleanor retired, a soft knock sounded from the far room. 1, 2, then silence. Arthur rose, heart racing. Eleanor emerged into the passage, pale. "Did you hear it?" She avoided his eyes. "Nothing worth hearing." "You cannot keep denying it."
Some things are denied by instinct, my lord. I opened that door, I know, and you should have stopped me. I touched nothing, I only saw. There was a letter. That letter must not be read. Why? Because it was written for me. Then why do you keep it? Because I have not had the courage to destroy it. Her voice trembled faintly. Arthur felt a mixture of guilt and tenderness. I will not read it if you do not wish. You already thought of it. That is enough. Eleanor sat before the fire. Her hands shook as she prepared tea. You do not understand what that letter holds. Then tell me. I cannot. It was written by your husband? She nodded. Arthur drew a deep breath. What did he say? Goodbye, she whispered. Only that. The fire snapped. Arthur found no words. She looked at him steadily. You must not come near that room again. I cannot promise. Then do not expect me to care for you. I never asked you to care for me. Not with words, you asked with your presence. They spoke no more that night. At dawn, Eleanor was already outside. Arthur followed with effort. You should not be out here. I do not want to die between walls. Nor is dying in the open any better. I do not intend to die today. You said the same yesterday. Arthur smiled wearily. Perhaps I am beginning to doubt my decision. Eleanor glanced at him sidelong. Doubting is not living, but it is a beginning. They stood silent, listening to the distant stream. Arthur leaned on his cane. Have you ever thought of loving again? Love is not decided. It arrives, or it does not. And if it has already arrived, would you then leave me in peace? Arthur lowered his gaze. I am not a man who inspires peace, but I still breathe. That gives me the right to try for something more than waiting for death. Eleanor bent to pick up a fallen branch. Try with life, not with me. They returned without speaking. The atmosphere had grown thick, intimate, fragile. That night, while she knitted by the fire, Arthur broke the quiet. Let me read it. Eleanor looked at him as though he had struck her. It could not help you understand. I do not need to understand. Perhaps I do. Perhaps that is why you cannot sleep. She set the knitting aside. You are crossing a boundary, my lord. I am not your enemy. Do not treat this as a game. I do not. But if the letter has no more power than the paper it is written on, why do you fear it? Eleanor stared at him. Because I still do not know whether I love him or hate him, and if I read it, I will have to decide. Arthur had no reply. He watched her walk away down the passage. The fire burned on slowly. Days of tense silence followed. One morning, Eleanor was not there. Fresh bread waited on the table. Arthur stepped onto the porch. Footprints led through the snow toward the stream. He followed slowly. He found her kneeling, washing clothes in silence. I thought you had left, he said. I only came to wash. Wash what? The little I have left. Arthur drew closer. And what would you do if I never returned to London? I would keep washing. I would not miss you. Missing serves no purpose. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it kills. He knelt beside her. Eleanor, whatever that letter says, it will not destroy you more than you are already destroyed. Do not destroy me further yourself. I came to destroy nothing. You came to die, and that destroys more than anything. Arthur fell silent. The wind blew hard. "Then teach me to live here." Eleanor looked at him in disbelief. "What do you know of living outside London drawing rooms?" "Nothing, but I can learn." "And for what?" "To have a reason that is not death." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "Do not say that." "Why not?" "Because it reminds me that I once wanted the same." They walked back without words. That night, Eleanor spoke suddenly. "I read the letter." Arthur turned. "When?" "Last night." "And what did it say?" "Nothing I did not already know. That he left believing I did not love him." Arthur felt a knot in his throat. "And did you love him?" "More than I understood at the time." She sat down, exhausted. "Now I have nothing left to fear." "Then open that door." "Not yet." Silence wrapped them.
Arthur sipped tea. Then he looked at her with resolve. "Eleanor, I will stay here forever." She regarded him calmly. "And your title and London? All that died when I reached these hills. You cannot renounce your name. I already have. Now I am only Arthur." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "Then, Arthur, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" "Live it with you." She gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Do not say it so quickly. I have thought it too long. If life gave me another chance, I will not waste it in silence." Eleanor rose and went to the window. The sun shone over the fields. "It has been years since I heard anything like that," she said, voice trembling. "Someone saying they want to stay, not from pity, but from love." Arthur went to her. "I did not come from pity. I came because I cannot imagine a tomorrow without seeing you." She turned, eyes moist. "And if tomorrow I tire of you, then it will be a tomorrow closer to paradise." Eleanor laughed. That laugh undid him. Arthur touched her cheek. She did not withdraw. "I am no longer afraid," she murmured. "Nor I." He embraced her. It was not desperate. It was calm, serene, like waiting that ends. Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. "You took a long time to come." The exact time needed to learn how to arrive. They parted only to look at each other. Arthur smiled. "There's something I brought with me." "What?" "A promise." He searched his coat, drew out a small wooden box. He opened it. A simple silver ring. Eleanor stared, astonished. "No." "Yes," he said before she could finish. "I no longer have a title worth anything, nor fortune to offer, but I have this, the life left to me, and hands I want to be yours." She stepped back, tears rising. "Eleanor, no. Say yes." Eleanor covered her face with her hands. "I cannot believe it." "Believe it. You gave me back my soul, and now I want to give you my name, not as a count, as a man." She trembled. "I do not need a name. I need yours." Silence stretched. Only wind tapped the window. Eleanor lowered her hands. "If I say yes, you promise never to leave again." "I swear." She drew a deep breath, extended her hand. "Then yes, Arthur, yes." He laughed in disbelief and embraced her. She wept against his chest. She laughed, too. "I never thought I would feel anything like this again." "Nor I." He slid the ring onto her finger. "Now I can die peacefully," he joked. "Do not say it," she replied, giving his shoulder a gentle slap. "I do not want to bury you again. Then you will have to take great care of me, and I of you." They spent the day laughing, walking the fields, remembering. Arthur showed her the lavender growing by the stream. "I planted it the first day I arrived. I thought it would never bloom. Look!"
Eleanor knelt and touched the flowers. They smell just like the house. I wanted this place to remember you, in case one day I was alone again. She looked at him. You will not be alone again, nor will you. They returned before dusk. Eleanor lit the fire. Arthur made tea. They sat before the flames. She rested her head on his shoulder. And now what follows? Living and teaching you to laugh more often. That cannot be taught. Then I will try every day. And if one day you forget, touch my hand. I will remind you. They remained still. They heard the fire crackle. Outside the wind had ceased. The night was clear. Arthur spoke softly. I never thought love could arrive so late. Sometimes it arrives when one is ready. And if you had found me earlier, would you have loved me the same? I would have been afraid. Arthur kissed her forehead. Then it was the perfect moment. Yes, she whispered, exactly now. Hours slipped away. The wood burned to embers. Eleanor closed her eyes, drowsy. Arthur covered her with a blanket. He watched her, heart full. When dawn came, he found her at the door, gazing at the hills. What are you doing awake so early? Listening to the world breathe. And what does it say? That we are no longer the same. I like what we are now. So do I. They crossed the fields, laughing at nothing. Arthur walked steadily, no cough, no pain. At the stream they paused. Eleanor touched the water, cold as the first time, but now it does not frighten me, because I no longer wait to die. No, now I wait to live long enough to grow old beside you. Eleanor looked at him, eyes shining. You always speak this way, only when I am certain. They returned at dusk. Arthur took her hand. Eleanor, do you realize this place is no longer a tomb? I know, it's a home. Inside, the fire waited. Arthur closed the door. He set the notebook on the table. What are you doing? Finishing my story. And how does it end? Arthur smiled. With you telling me you love me again. Eleanor raised her eyebrow playfully. And if you do not say it, then there is no ending? She laughed, walked to him, and embraced him tightly. I love you, Arthur Hawthorne. He kissed her forehead. Now the story can rest here. Night wrapped them peacefully. No fear, no ghosts. Outside, lavender grew free under the moon. Inside, the house breathed like a complete home. Two souls who found each other when time no longer seemed enough. Arthur whispered, I came to these hills to die, Eleanor, and I ended up learning to live in them. She smiled, head against his chest, and I, who lived surrounded by shadows, found light in you. He stroked her hair. There is nothing more to say. No, only to stay. Rain fell gently, like a memory taking leave. Arthur held her closer. He breathed her name. Eleanor raised her eyes. She looked into his and said in an eternal whisper, Yes, Arthur, we stay.